gentlemen, it's just about 7:30. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Town Hall. For those who may not know me, I'm the Reverend Bob Key. I'm the Dean of Jersey, and I'm also a resident for the last 8.5 years of the district under discussion this evening, which means that I want to hear the answers to these questions every bit as much as you do. Let me just explain what we all agreed will happen, and that is that each candidate will speak for up to 5 minutes as an introduction. They've drawn lots to decide who will go first, and the batting order is Sam, and then Jeff, and then Bernie, and then Rod, and then Martin. After those initial 5-minute speeches, I will take questions from the floor. May I say that it works better if you ask the questions and they give the speeches rather than the other way around. So if you could have genuine questions, that would be a tremendous help. Do we have a roving mic tonight? Yes, I think we do. So, if you is there a roving mic? Yeah. Okay. So when we get to that, if you raise a hand, I'll call you to ask a question, and each candidate will have 90 seconds, or if they really want to press it, 2 minutes to answer the question. We're going to vary the order in which they make their responses. It won't happen with such nice people, but if I feel they really have wriggled and haven't addressed the issue at all, I may just gently point that out to them after the 90 seconds and they can put it right in the remaining 30. More now from me, the timing of this is that we will draw stumps come what may at 9:30. And as one of the candidates said to me a few moments ago, if we run out of questions and we're in the pub early, well, that's absolutely in your hands. The important thing, friends, is that you have a chance to ask whatever questions you want to ask. Okay? So, without further ado, Sam. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen. It was just 7 months ago that we were here for the St Helier No. 2 by-elections at Hustings, and I've been honoured to serve as deputy since then. I now stand here asking you to put your trust in me for a full term. In my 6 months as a States member, I believe that I've stuck to my key manifesto pledge, which was that I would always stand up for St Helier and its people. I've asked more questions and lodged more propositions in just 6 months than many States members have in their whole 3 years in the States. I've tried to hold ministers to account by asking tough questions on subjects like 0 hours contracts, our failing mental health service, and rehabilitation for drugs offenders. And being in the States, I've learned firsthand just how fundamentally important it is that St Helier has States members who are prepared to stand up for ordinary people here to improve social policy, protect public services, and oppose overdevelopment in the already densely populated parts of the town. St Helier has drawn the short straw in Jersey's democracy. We're underrepresented in the States, and many politicians take our island's capital for granted. It's taken years to make progress on getting the States to pay parish rates, but it looks like we'll finally win that argument sometime next year. And that's why we need politicians who will stand up for St Helier. And Jeff and I are absolutely committed to opposing this monstrous proposed development at the gasworks site. But the most important thing I've learned in my short time in the States is that you will never ever achieve anything in politics unless you are prepared to work together as a team. Working as one independent politician out of 49, all pulling in different directions, you are never going to get anywhere. And that is why this time round I'm standing as a candidate for the political party I helped form, Reform Jersey. We know that our political system is completely broken. We have the lowest voter turnouts in Europe, and the annual social survey last year showed that 70% of the public were dissatisfied with the states of Jersey. We know that over 1/3 of the next states has already been elected uncontested. That means that 17 people will be taking home £47,000 a year of your money and voting on laws that govern your lives without having received a single vote to do so. St Mary has one States member for every 800 people, yet we in St Helier have to settle for one for every 3,000 people. There's no connection between how people vote and what government we end up with, and that's why we end up with bad governance. It is clear that something has got to change. In line with my manifesto pledge, I did bring forward a proposition to the States to have the Chief Minister elected directly by the public, but the States voted against it. I said at the time that if the public were denied the right to choose their head of government whilst power is being consolidated in the Chief Minister with collective responsibility, that something else would have to change. So we're standing together as a party to try and bring some accountability and effectiveness to politics. To tackle the problems of the 21st century, we need a government whose head is in the 21st century, and we don't have that now. Until we have that, we will not have a government that is fit to tackle the serious problems we face as an island community. Now, I don't have time to talk about all of those problems, so I'm just going to focus on one, and Jeff will elaborate on some of the others. I want to talk about the biggest problem we have facing the island, and that is population. The States recently passed an interim population policy that was simply meant to reaffirm what the policy technically already was, but which hadn't been properly enforced. We voted against this because we saw it as cynical manoeuvring by Senators Gorsuch and Ozer to avoid having to come up with a real population policy which they knew would be unpopular with islanders ahead of the election. The current government's plan for economic growth is built on the idea that if you just import more and more workers in, you'll somehow grow the economy. But that's exactly what Jersey has been doing for several years now, and the economy has still been shrinking whilst unemployment has gone up and tax receipts have gone down. This means that actually we're a poorer island as a result. We need a complete shift in policy to one that values the workers who are already here in Jersey and provides them with the training opportunities they need to achieve their potential, rather than just automatically importing labour. We're already struggling to come up with adequate solutions to the housing shortage, to funding a decent education for all of our young people, and for long-term health provisions. The answer is not to keep raising the population.
30 seconds.
Because we risk damaging our environment and struggling with the cost of infrastructure. The choice in this election is between a business-as-usual party who will continue the way things have always been done and bury their heads in the sand over the problems we face, or it's for Reform Jersey and a new way of doing politics. Thank you very much.
Jeff. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Different height for me. I want to start with looking at how we run the economy. And I'm going to suggest that the economic model on which we base our economy is broken. And by that economic model, I mean the low tax, low spend model. It's broken. Why do I say it's broken? Because the low spend part is inevitably going to go up. It will become higher and higher as we age as a society, as we require more health needs, more health services. The spend must go up. But before the election, nobody, no minister, nobody else wants to talk about possible tax rises because of that rising cost of looking after ourselves, especially our elderly. And so no one will say that. We in Reform Jersey say that it's almost inevitable that taxes will go up. It's not a question of whether they will, it's a question of how they will. And we in Reform Jersey suggest that GST has damaged the least wealthy, the poorest. 20 means 20 has squeezed middle earners. What does that leave? That leaves the really wealthy who have to contribute some more to their share of the tax burden. What sort of society do we have where we have a minimum wage at around £6.63, which means that the worker takes home, let's say, £240 a week? I've calculated that a single person in a one-bedroom flat earning that cannot survive. They will apply for income support and they'll receive something of the order of £140 a week in order that they can survive. That is in-work poverty. It also means that each and every taxpayer is contributing £7,000 to income support to support this person a year, and £2,000 extra in supplementation. So that low-wage job costs the taxpayer £9,000 a year in support in order that person can survive. What sort of society is it? Well, it's a wealthy society in which we pay poverty wages. We must look at, as they are in the UK, at raising minimum wage to make it, if possible, a living wage. A living wage not statutory, but voluntary, so that people can survive. And good employers know that if they pay their workers properly, then they engender loyalty and good service from those particular staff. Another problem that we in Reform Jersey have raised, and we are going to get enforced on zero hours contracts. Now this, we believe, is rife in the island. Not only just in the shops and in bars, where it may or may not be appropriate to have zero hours contracts, but actually in the States using zero hours contracts, where it's entirely inappropriate. The banks, en masse, using zero hours contracts, where somebody can be working for 2.5, 3 years, never seen a proper contract, they're on minimum hours, they don't know what holidays they can have, and often they're not entitled to holidays. They can't take sick pay, there's no sick pay. If you're off on a zero hours contract. And what's worse, if you're on a low pay and very, very low hours on your zero hours contract, you actually lose the right to claim from Social Security when you're sick. So it's a really unfair system. And we must, and we will follow up the report that we've asked for. It'll be coming in the first 3 months of next year. We will be demanding proper action to curtail the abuse of zero hours contracts, which we believe is rife through the country, through the island. We believe that a living wage is the way to go forward. Not compulsory, I would say, but voluntary. For example, the States has no minimum wage and could probably easily state that it was a living wage employment. Most of the banks, for most of their employees, are paying a living wage, which might be around the order of £8, £9, perhaps £10 an hour. If you want to see a strive for fairness and justice in St Helier, then please vote for me and vote for Reform Jersey candidates. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Bernie, we turn to you. You have 5 minutes.
As we've only got a few in the room, I can actually see most of you without the glasses on, so I'll take the glasses off. My name, as most of you know, is Bernie Manning. I'm a resident of St Helier, and I stood for Deputy in St Helier. This is my 3rd major election. I shall give you 5 minutes of layabout overview of what I'd like to see achieved if I am elected by you as Deputy in St Helier District 2. First is education. Cutting the education budget is a big mistake. We should be investing in further training and career development, particularly for school leavers and those in long-term unemployment through no fault of their own. We should be retraining these people to find jobs, especially something like coding, which we're going to have a shortage of if we're going to go down the digital Jersey way. We need to prioritise the way we fund education and not just build the like-to-have projects that are not necessary at this time. On immigration, I worked with a former deputy back in 1999 to bring out work permits, which urgently need to be introduced. The construction industry is already looking to recruit 500 new employees, most of which will come from outside the island. Also, the access to work qualification period, which at the moment stands at 5 years. That should be increased to at least 10 years. The reason why the work permit scheme was thrown out back in 1999 was we were told there was hardly any unemployment. Times have changed, and if elected, I will push forward for work permits to be brought in as soon as possible. Tourism. Can Jersey recapture its past glory? With more event-led attractions like the Battle of Flowers, the Battle of Britain, and utilising our wonderful and historical heritage that the island has, I believe we can. I.e., the 30th of December is the anniversary of the Vega arrival in Jersey. This would be an ideal time to launch a year of World War II celebrations, which would be picked up nationally, especially from people from Sweden, Canada and Portugal, who helped to supply the Vega. Social issues like work and pensions. Why is it that states employees, finance sector employees, have pension schemes of retail, hospitality, construction, etc. are left out? Surely we should be introducing workers' pension schemes similar to the schemes that are now in place in the UK. Free eye tests. I believe that everyone over 70 should have free eye tests, and also those in income support. Eye tests pick up things like diabetes, which is now climbing in Jersey. So this will be one way of detecting early signs of diabetes. We're meant to be a digital island now, and yet St Helier does not have free Wi-Fi. Apart from areas like Millennium Park, we have 30 minutes. I believe we should be pushing for St Helier at least, if not island-wide, free Wi-Fi, which would help local businesses and students doing their studying. Reform in the States. In my manifesto, I have written why I believe at the moment constables should stay in the States. But I believe that states will not reform this out. It's like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. That's just not going to happen. What we need to do is to create a new Royal Commission, as we did back in 1948. We need to bring experts to assist in the best way of creating a reform that will take Jersey confidently and securely, and not just our future generations to come. And not cherry pick like we did to Clover. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We turn now to Rod. Rod, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I first want to take this opportunity to thank all of you who put your faith in me and voted for me last time. I hope I've lived up to your expectations, and I hope you'll do it again. I want to give you some background, tell you what I've been doing, and then tell you what I hope to achieve if re-elected. I'm 61 and I've lived in Jersey since 1976. When I first arrived, I worked like a lot of immigrants do in a host of jobs. Barman, planting and picking potatoes, picking tomatoes, hired cars, photographic printer, and so it goes on. I married Fiona, a Jersey girl, in 1985. We have 2 children, both Jersey born, educated in state schools, and fortunately for me, both working here. I became a stay-at-home dad by day and teaching classes at night. I lived in a private rental flat before moving to state accommodation and finally buying my own property in Stopford Road in 2000. So I understand what it's like to have little money, to claim off the parish, to work your way through a complicated social security system. I briefly moved back into teaching at Granville before entering the world of finance. I became the director of Hepburn's Life and Pensions, working 17 years before engaging with politics. In 2006, whilst chairman of the Personal Finance Society, I chaired, along with the government, the working party that created the island's only personal pension plan, called the Retirement Annuity Trust Scheme. After topping the poll in the 2011 elections, I became Deputy Helier number 2. Over the last 3 years, I've worked as an Assistant Minister for Education, Sport and Culture, my portfolio including culture and youth. Because of my particular skills, over the last 3 years, I've heard all the appeals for 450 families. I helped create and deliver the new £6 million digital vision for all island schools. And just to explain how important this is, 6 million is what is being spent on the whole of the UK's digital strategy, its population being over 64 million. Clive Beale from Raspberry Pi said, "This is by far the best digital vision I have ever seen from any jurisdiction." I've also worked on the 4 Region Steering Group, Public Sector Reform and the Planning Appeals Panel. All controversial and tough roles, but roles I have tackled with creativity, positivity and passion. I'm a member of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Committee, the St Helier Youth Committee, the Grand Vaud Youth Club Committee, the Bad Verzac Training Committee, the Slow Food Committee and the St Helier Allotment Group. I founded and still run after 10 years the 745 Breakfast Club, a non-profit networking club with around 200 members that meets monthly. I feel this illustrates my dedication not only as a serving States member, but as a staunch supporter of the parish and its constituents. I'm committed to helping whomever I can and have answered every email, every telephone call and every cry for help. Speaking on behalf of people at tribunals, planning appeals and neighbourhood arbitrations. I spoke against the Springfield and Gas Place development, although I do believe we build housing there, but not too high or too dense. Every time I've been asked to help, I've accepted the challenge wholeheartedly and will continue to do so. If re-elected, I will continue to serve the parish to the best of my ability. If chosen as Minister, I will dedicate myself to creating a world-class education system that will inspire both our remarkable teachers and our remarkable students. I want to work more closely with private enterprise and secure a relationship built on our skills strategy and contemplate an IT college. I support the living wage and the capping of GST. I want this island to realise its full potential and provide jobs for all school leavers, encouraging degree students to return. I want to maintain our finance sector and help re-establish a thriving tourism industry. Working with Digital Jersey, I want to produce a creative digital industry that capitalises on our inherent strengths, the creative industries being the biggest area of growth in the UK. I want to establish a youth parliament and get our disaffected young people engaged with the political system that affects them directly. I would lobby for a full-scale review of how we deal with an increasingly ageing population and cure the disease of loneliness. Thank you. I want to help the public sector reform achieve its targets and create a world-class frontline public service. It's my belief that with spirit and inspiration, we can protect the more vulnerable members of our society, create a strong, sustainable economy, and make all people's lives better. To do all that, I will need your help and your votes. Please vote Rob Ryans on October the 15th. Thank you.
Finally, Martin, your opening speech. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming out. Well done. I'm not knocking you because you turned up, but this is a kind of indictment really on the state of Jersey politics in general, and unfortunately on the state of District Number 2 and its representation. I was born in Jersey, and I grew up in District Number 2 at number 20 Vauxhall Street, where we lived between, I think I lived there for about 7 years, between the ages of 7 and 14. And then we moved down the road to the other end of Halkett Place. So St Helier District Number 2 resonates with me, and St Helier resonates with me. Currently I'm living in District Number 2 at number 20 David Place. and I've been walking around the streets and I've been talking to people. I'm not going to bother with manifestos. I'm not going to bother with promising you aspirational this and aspirational that, because, you know, if I were to be realistic, even if I am voted in, and I would hope I would be, the chances of me having any effect in the first 3 years would be minimal. I'm not connected to a political party. I don't think the Chamber at the moment can sustain political parties. In fact, there is only one official political party. And I think that, and I have no establishment connections. So I'm very much a lone voice, a real true independent, if you want. So I'm not going to come up with policies, and obviously I have no experience in the Chamber, as I am relatively new to this. But what I will say is that I am standing, I suppose we all are really, standing for a fairer society that allows people to be nurtured and develop and realise their potential within that society. And this is something that we need to be working on. And this is something that we are going to need to fund. And it's the funding that is the issue, really. Because, you know, we've just passed a budget which is talking of draconian cuts to the public sector. And increases once more on consumable goods. I mean, you know, you may not drink beer, but I do. And 1 pence in the budget equates to about 12 or 15 pence at the pump. And I don't think that's really good, you know. I like to drink beer. And I don't want to pay too much for it. You know, like everybody else.
Here we go. Keep you busy in the hospital. Here we go.
Hi. Hi. So, really what I would like to do, if I am elected, what I'd like to do is I'd like to investigate the possibility of a fairer tax regime, and maybe the removal completely of income tax, with a replacement of a much higher consumption tax, with rebates to those on lower incomes. It's a possibility. It's something that needs to be investigated. We need to make everybody responsible for what they use, you know, because everybody uses everything. You know, you drive your car, doesn't matter whether you live in Trinity or St Brelard, you're using the roads. Somebody has to pay for those roads. We all have to pay for those roads. And it is becoming increasingly obvious that we do not want to, or the state does not want to pay for the condition or the upkeep of the infrastructure without further tax increases. But, you know, we don't need necessarily to increase tax. What we need is to widen the band of people who pay tax, and maybe go and have a look at some of these more opaque corners of the Jersey tax system, and maybe start to claw around in there and see what agreements and what arrangements were made at other times.
30 seconds.
Incredible. I didn't think I'd even talk about this. So anyway, I'll go back. I'll hopefully answer your questions as best I can. I'll just explain what I'm doing. For the last year, I've been working 0-hour contracts with no representation, with no union support, with no support from income support, for example. And if I'll just give you, I did this on the, back of a fag packet thing, Johnny, but for me to earn a living wage, and I estimate the living wage to be about £600 in this current economy as it stands. For me to earn a living wage and I do 2 jobs, and on the money that I'm earning at the moment, I would need to work near to 80 hours a week. Now that's, unreasonable. I'll do it if I have to, but it's unreasonable. And for me to then go out and rent in the private sector...
I'm sorry.
I know this is
The floor is open. Just to remind you, in case you slipped in later, it's the role of the guys up here to make the speeches, and the privilege of those in the chairs to ask the questions. If you wish to ask a question, if you could raise a hand, and then I'll call you as I see you first. Sir, yes, I see you first.
I'd just like to ask the candidates, what do they think the reason is for this terribly apathetic turnout tonight?
Okay, the question is that he'd like to ask the candidates what they think the reason is for the terribly apathetic turnout tonight. And Rod, why don't you take that first?
Okay, I was informed on the way in here that there's some football playing tonight. I don't think that's the main reason at all, though. I think the reason we've got this apathy isn't really about some of the stuff that I've heard earlier about education not supplying a knowledge of how the states operate and letting people know what it is that we do. I think people are just bored of it. I just think they're absolutely sick and tired of it. We just had a whole few years of the Scottish election. Just disappeared in the last few weeks. We've now running into a UK election, so that's on the TV, and suddenly the media flushes it through. I think for the majority of people, it's just business as usual. They see it as an operational thing. They're not too concerned about it, and I think for me the real key to it all was when they turned around, when the Assembly turned around and said no to the referendum, and I think that's the key. They're just fed up with it, to be fair.
Thank you very much. Sam, you go next.
Sure. Well, you can't blame people for being apathetic, can you? Because Jersey has a pretty appalling political system. There's no logic whatsoever in having 3 classes of states member. That makes it a very, very difficult system for people who are first-time voters or haven't lived in the island for too long, or young people, etc. It's a very, very difficult system to get to grips with. People will never understand what they're voting for because it's all personality politics when it's people standing as independents. You look at a ballot paper and if you're not someone who's been following politics for a long time, a ballot paper is a list of names that mean absolutely nothing to you. So it's not surprising at all, and you get it on the doorstep a lot. Why should I bother voting? It doesn't, my vote won't make a difference. And it's very, very difficult to argue with that. The way we overcome that, I think, can be done in 3 steps. First of those is to completely reform our electoral system so that we have fair and equal votes for everyone, in particular people in St Helier, because they're the ones most disadvantaged by the electoral system at the moment. Step 2, I personally believe, and that's why I'm standing as a member of one, I believe we need political parties, because only then will people know that they're not voting for personalities, they're not voting for a pretty face, or not a pretty face as the case may be, they're voting for policies and a potential government. That is what motivates people to vote. If you compare Jersey with Gibraltar, a similar place to us, they have 80% turnouts in their elections, and it's because they know their vote matters.
You've had 90 seconds.
And the third thing, fall in love with democracy again, because it matters.
Bernie, will you go next?
Okay. Well, whilst I've been knocking on doors, a lot of people have told me that it's a waste of time. The states members do not listen to them. After the referendum and not taking any notice whatsoever of the outcome of that, they said, why should we bother? And that's happening regularly when we knock on the doors. I think the only way forward to get people interested is if we all went on an island-wide mandate. They keep making excuses why it's not possible, but with today's technology, an island-wide mandate is quite possible. And rather than having a hustings where we all turn up, or a few people turn up, you could have questions sent in, and then they're put to the candidates who have a short time to answer them, and then all answers go online at the same time. So nobody has a chance to see what the other candidate has put forward. Not like some of the hustings, like the senatorials, when you've got 19 people for 8 places, where after a while you're hearing the same answers time and time again. So I believe that's what we need to do. Rather than go down party politics, I think we should all be on an island-wide mandate.
Thank you very much. Martin.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for reform of the states. I think most people are tired of that particular subject, but I think it's a necessary, it's a necessary thing to happen, because it is, Sam's right. Really, it is farcical, and you are given a huge array of different personalities who you can't really know. I mean, even in a short amount of time you're given to canvass, for example, you can't really explain what it is you're about, and you can only really sort of put over a kind of small amount of what it is you want to stand for. I think people are bored. I think the states as well are to blame to a certain extent, because I think that they have not opened up the debate. They're not listening to anybody. They don't care. That's what people think. And I think that's probably true. And I think we need to have a debate about democracy. We need to make it wider, and we need more people to contribute to it, because everybody has a different view of what democracy is. And to make it effective, we need to involve more people in the debate, really, and let's have an adult debate as opposed to a kind of non-adult debate.
Jeff. Thank you, Bob. I think the basic problem is that people feel, and they're right, that there is little or no connection between the way they vote and what policies occur. The person who decides on policies, by and large, is going to be the next Chief Minister. Now, that Chief Minister is not elected by you, the voters, it's elected within the states. And what happens in the states is that people start, once they've been in there for a few years, they start to regard the high opinion of fellow states members as the most important thing, rather than the opinion of the voter, which is actually the really important thing. So a lack of connection where people can blatantly promise one thing: I will support GST exemptions on food and essentials, and then when they get in the States, first vote comes up on exactly that topic and they vote the other way. Now, that lack of honesty is spotted and known by the public. No wonder they feel like it's not worth it, nothing ever changes. The only way to achieve change is, I believe, through parties, through getting together collectively and actually coming up with a proper manifesto that we can stick to. That's the way forward. And then perhaps people will start to see that things can work. For example, the first decision we will take in November is who is the Chief Minister. Now, if we're sitting there, we're standing 8 people across the board on similar platforms. If we say to that Chief Minister, it will be a tight vote, do you want our 6 votes, our 6 votes or 8 votes? Because to get the Chief Minister and have your way, you will need them. Then what of our agenda are you going to bring on? And we can actually hold some control, some sway over what the Chief Minister does. That's the way forward.
Thank you. No, perfect. That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. I'm looking for the second question. Just there, and a microphone's on its way.
I have anyway. Thanks. Having shown such vehement anger at the amount of money states members get paid, I think more than one of you did, I was just wondering if you'd ever do it for free. And I'm assuming the answer will be no. So could you tell me why? For all of us.
Thank you very much indeed. If you got that question, it's would the candidates do it for free? I suppose if not, why not? Or if so, why? So where should we go first with this? Sam, let's come to you.
If I could do it for free, because I have independent means, I would, because I absolutely love this job, and it's something that is something I'm absolutely passionate about, is representing St Helier. If I were able to, I would still do it. But as it currently stands, if there were no wage for states members, I simply couldn't do it, because I'm not from a wealthy family, I don't have people to support me, and I put a lot of time and effort into this job that I simply wouldn't be able to do another job along the side. And I think other people in my age group would look at this as an absolutely terrible career otherwise, because they would look at their lives ahead. They wouldn't be able to get a mortgage. They wouldn't be able to pay off their student debt, things like that. It's obviously an emotive subject, and I can see why people get very annoyed about it, because they feel like they're paying an amount for states members who simply aren't worth it. And I think the ultimate solution there is that we should be electing states members, not just of calibre, but we need a diversity of membership, people that represent all sections of the community. There was a very, very popular politician many years ago called Norman LeBrock, who was well renowned for being a man of the people and someone who stood up for ordinary working people. He was only able to be a states member because he had to resort to the charity of his constituents, going cap in hand to them. And I think a return to that would be a thoroughly bad thing. We need a wide section of the community represented in the states, and that means that they do have to be paid.
Martin.
Yeah, why would you do it for nothing? I think that's a reasonable question.
Do you agree then with the high level of...
No, I think that, no, I don't think that, considering that you're going to have to sit in there, and these guys have done it so they know, and go through huge amounts of legislation, you're going to have to look at, that's it, presumably if you're doing that, there's no way of knowing that for sure, but that's the idea. You could be called on by an elector on a Sunday, for example, with a particular problem. I mean, why would you do it for nothing? I don't understand the problem that people have with paid representation. I just don't understand that. Yes, okay, it sounds like a big sum of money, and yes, okay, there are a lot of members in the House, and so therefore it is a big sum of money when you collect all of it together and put it as one lump sum. But I can't think of any other job where you would do it for free. I mean, yes, people volunteer, but no, I think you pay representation, and you hope that representation delivers in some way, and you can hold them accountable for that delivery. If you don't think your politician after 3 years has been worth 50 grand a year or whatever the pay is, then just don't vote them again. If that's your personal belief. But I think that to get and again, Sam's right. You need a diverse range of people in the states. You don't just need business guys. You don't just need farmers. You don't just need. You need all of these people. You need artists. You need even a guy who sweeps the road, for example, has got an opinion, has got a view on something. Pay them.
Thank you very much indeed. Rod.
Why do people get paid for this role? Because it's a proper job. The hours are long, the responsibilities can be huge, and it may be a shock to some people, but there are actually members of the states who actually don't take an income and choose not to do that. I think it's important. I think both Martin and Sam have hit on a couple of things there that are relevant. In the same extent to Sam, if it were possible and I had a good income from somewhere else, I would possibly consider doing it for free, but it's just an impossibility. I think it's a real job. I think it takes real effort, and as Martin said, we need these different people in here. We need to be able to convince people that if they turn up and they do the work and they take the responsibility, they get paid. That's all.
Jeff.
Yes. Removing pay from the job, which is a full-time job, it's a proper job, would mean that only the wealthy and the retired could do it. Now, that's what used to happen. I've been in the States long enough to remember the days when they first introduced what was called income replacement, which allowed you to take some pay, and it was actually based on what was your last year's salary. Right, we replaced that whilst you did the job. And in fact, at the time, I was a support worker for the homeless, and I actually got some replacement of salary. But actually, when I started, I had to go on doing some shifts down at the shelter in order to make ends meet, in order to make sure it worked. And that was very difficult to do. It is, unfortunately, a full-time job, and as Sam says, I couldn't afford to do it for free. Most people couldn't. It would stop young people thinking of it as a career, and yet I think we need to promote young people and to see political careers as worthwhile. Certainly we need a cross-section of people. We need the chamber to look more like the people that it represents, rather than just a set of grey hairs in grey suits. A bit like me, I'm afraid of getting there.
Thank you very much. Bernie.
Thank you. Well, as I'm passionate about my island in St Helier, if I had other means, then yes, I would do it free of charge. But as I haven't, I'm afraid I need to take a salary, as this would be my main job. But I do believe that we should actually have the pay structure linked to public sector workers. If they don't get a pay rise, we don't. I don't see why in the past some of the workers don't have a pay rise or a low pay rise, and yet the state's members get a decent pay rise. I think that is out of order. So I believe it should be linked to that. I'd be quite happy to keep the actual, I think it's 46,000 at the moment, over the next 4 years. We know that that's what we'll get for the 4 years, so you can budget for that. If people can live on a lot less than that, I think we should be able to live on 46,000.
Thank you very much indeed. Where's my next question? Yes, please, down here. We'll just wait for the microphone.
If you got re-elected or elected for the first time, would you be attending the parish hall assemblies, as I feel it's important for you to attend them and keep up with parish affairs? For those of you that were in this elected for 2014, I do have a tally for those that turned up and those that didn't. It makes interesting reading.
Thank you very much indeed. The link between the parish and the deputies. Jeff?
Yes, I'm probably on your list as an attender at the parish assemblies, which is relatively rare. I do try and come along when there are significant, important measures before the assembly, but it's also relevant to say that we do have regular meetings with the constable as the deputies together on a not quite a weekly basis, but certainly a monthly basis. So we keep abreast of issues that are developing in the parish in that sense. So yes, I think it's important to stay in touch with the parish, but significant, not necessarily to attend every parish meeting. I don't think there are lots of aspects to the job, but that is one of them, and the balance, we all choose a different balance.
Bernie?
Thank you for the question. I actually turned up last year to 11 out of 15 of the parish assemblies. I'm not too sure how many I've turned up to this year. Last week I actually turned up to one, just to make sure that at the moment People's Park can only be used for recreational use. And there's a proposition put forward last week to have a tank put underground for the runoff water from Dandara's site. The word in the proposition said that they were going to lift the recreational use. So I turned up to make sure that that wasn't the case. And as it was minuted on the night, that it will stay for recreational use. The reason why I turn up at these parish meetings is there is lots of stuff that goes on at them that doesn't meet the public don't see some of the things that goes on. Like we have licensing issues, and there are people for and against some of these. So I actually speak up whenever possible in either favour or against a particular issue. Some of these may seem trivial to some people, but to other people it means a nightclub or a bar opening late at night, playing loud music to them, and they get an issue with that establishment, and they want to try to stop the establishment having a music licence or extend their hours.
90 seconds.
Like one particular issue which I pointed out at the time, and it was stopped, was the cafe by the library had asked for a licence so that it can serve food till 10 o'clock at night and then stay open till 1 o'clock serving alcohol, which I pointed out was actually wrong, and unfortunately the constable and nobody else on the panel had spotted that at the time until I mentioned it, and we stopped at getting a licence. Thank you.
Martin?
Yeah, I don't
think, I've never been to a parish hall or a town hall assembly. And I don't think I would make all of them, but I think I would make some of them. And I would like to think that I had, an active interest in what was going on in the parish, yeah, without a doubt. So yes, I would turn up to some assemblies. And, but I don't think I'd be able to guarantee I'd turn up to everyone, that's all. But yeah, I think it's probably a good thing to do, actually, because you are representing a district in that parish, and so therefore, some of these issues like Bernie was talking about, for example, like licensing and stuff like that, it's going to arise in your district. There are pubs, there are bars in District 2, obviously, and so yeah, I think it is kind of important, especially this parish, because it's the biggest one and it's the most populous, and it's there's a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, I think I would want to keep an eye on some of that stuff. Yeah, thank you.
Rod.
Thank you for that question, actually, Sarah. Parish Hall Assembly, I do try to turn up as many as I can. I don't quite know where I am on your list. But I think I read earlier lists of things that I'm involved in, like the St Helier Youth Committee, which is attached to the parish, Bad Verzac Twinning Committee, which again is linked to the parish, and the St Helier Allotment Group. So there's an awful lot of things going on in my life, and equally the same with regard to the education. But I think it's absolutely paramount. You're dead right. I think it's a responsibility, particularly if you're a deputy of a district in St Helier, to turn up to the parish assemblies. It is the place where you really find out what's happening in your parish. You can have a direct effect, as Bernie's just mentioned, a direct effect on the way the parish works, and you can question both constituents, the procurer and the constable, all in one go at the same time. So I think it's paramount that you try to attend as many as you can. Thank you.
Sam.
Thanks for that question, Sarah. I've been at some parish assemblies. I haven't been at all. St Helier is a very, very big parish, and the parish assembly considers all sorts of things. Often it considers things that are to do with the very, very far end of the parish, not in my district, and so there's some issues there that I'm not particularly well informed on. But there are issues, whenever there's something to do with something going on in my district or something that's going to affect my district, I do try and go to them. I've been at all of the parish assemblies to do with the proposed development at Maison de Ville. But it's not just parish assemblies, there's lots of other stuff that goes on in the parish that are important. Jeff mentioned we have monthly meetings with the constable. Those are really important, and you get to hear lots of things there and bring up your concerns and issues constituents have brought to you. There's also lots of other events. Liberation Day, I was at the town hall for most of the day for that. That was really, really good. And you get the odd thing like that crops up that are not just important to be at to meet the people of St Helier, but they're also really enjoyable to be at those. So yeah, I mean, I try and pay attention to whenever something important is going on in my district, and I've also recently been at a few planning applications for things to do with things going on in St Helier, like the gasworks development and things like that. So yeah, it is important.
Thank you very much indeed. I think there was a question over here, sir. Again, the microphone is coming at high speed.
In terms of governmental reform, as a deputy, which alternatives would you either propose or support?
Can I just ask, sorry, I mean, maybe that these shining lights are probably better at understanding, but when you say government reform, do you mean the makeup of the states, or the government as opposed to the
I mean in terms of the makeup of the states, if the constables were to be voted out in the referendum and the states actually followed up with it, which alternative would the candidates either propose or support?
Thank you for your patience, that's really very helpful. Martin.
Yeah, I said on the vote.je site that I would lobby for the removal of the constables from the States Chamber. I think that we really have to rejig the whole structure and maybe go to some sort of larger districts, for example, East of Ireland, West of Ireland, North of Ireland, Centre, that kind of idea. I think it needs to be looked at, and I think we, ultimately, probably, and this kind of ties in with the earlier question about pay, we need to reduce the number of people in there, really, but make it fairer. And yeah, definitely not the constables. I think that I've got a bit of an issue with the parochial system, and I find it a bit too 17th century for me. And I think we are now in the 21st century, and I think it's we're moving forward. And I think really we need to be a much more actively democratic culture. How that is rejigged would be up to debate, because it's all, there's nothing, there is nothing really firm there. But yeah, I'd want to be part of that debate, and I'd want a lot of people to be part of that debate, and I think it's important. But yeah, on the constables front, no, enough.
Rod.
I voted to keep the constables in last time, but I think actually the writing's on the wall. I'm quite sure what will happen is the constables will be voted out. I think for me they create that unique link with the past in one of the oldest parliaments in the world. They're a direct source of, just as we talked about turning up for parish assemblies, they are really in touch with what happens in the populace, particularly St Helier for us. But I think, as everybody has said in the past, I think in terms of moving towards a clearer democracy, that I think the days are numbered. I think the constables even know that now. So I think what will happen in the referendum, I think you will see the constables go, and whatever the decision is of the populace, that's the one I would stand by.
Jeff.
The last referendum was completely ruined by the involvement of politicians in deciding how to set about that referendum. The fact that we ended up with 3 options is a farce, because a referendum should contain a question which is answered by a simple yes or no, and it must be simple. The election system and the states needs a complete overhaul. An end to the automatic right of the states, the constables to sit in the states, single type of member as recommended by Clothier, and the Chief Minister elected by the people would be a good start, along with the Central Electoral Register. We've got an entire department, the Population Office, whose sole task is to keep a register of who is here and where they live. Why can that not be a central register on which the election is based? Your name is on there, we know you're here, we know where you live, you can have a vote. Instead of which, I've got to go back to 2 people today that I saw yesterday, who, through no fault of their own, were not registered. And I've got to go and register them, because we've got to register every 3 years, or else you get wiped from the register. Now, a system that relies on an inaccurate register can never be an effective and good system.
Sam.
Thanks, Chris. I'll start general and then go specific. Reform Jersey's policy on states reform is that we will support anything that makes our system fairer, and we will oppose anything that makes it less fair. At the last referendum, all of the expert academic advice had told Senator Balash and the Electoral Commission that option B was a backward step that was going to make our system even less representative, but the states still put it to the public, even though it was not a question that was fit for purpose. So I'll support anything that makes the system fairer. In an ideal world, I would like one class of states member elected in equal sized constituencies where everybody has the same number of votes, but most importantly, every states member should represent the same number of people. Anything else is just gerrymandering, and the victims of gerrymandering in our system are St Helier, and that's absolutely not fair. We have this referendum coming up on the future of the constables in the States. I'm part of the campaign for non-messy, as we're calling it, which means no thanks in Jerier. The parish system is incredibly important to Jersey, but the link between the constables being in the States is not necessary for that parish system to thrive. In fact, I think it will be even better when the constables aren't automatically in the States, and some constables can stand for the States separately if they like, and some can choose to just focus on the parish. That's real democracy. That's people having a choice of who represents them in the States. The system we've got now is completely broken. We need one class of elected states member and equal votes for every person, no matter where they live in the island.
Bernie.
Right, I've actually said I'd like to see the constables stay in the States, but like Rod said, their time is nearly up. I'd still like them to have a link with the states, even if it's only similar to the dean's role, where they actually go to parish assemblies when it concerns their parish, to put their parishes or their parishioners' views forward. But especially if we go to super constituencies, there will not be a proper parish representation there. So I believe the constable should then be able to go in and speak up on behalf of the parish, but not have a vote. I also believe that the constables, as they're elected or not elected by the parishioners, should be paid for by the parishioners. Basically, everything else has been covered by the rest of the candidates. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's fascinating when you hear ideas that you haven't heard before, and then you hear them, at least in my case, more than once on the same day. So that's why I'm now looking for the next question. Sir, I see you. Can we just wait for the microphone, because some of us may be a little hard of hearing. Thank you very much.
Yes, I live in St Clement. You're going to be elected to govern me, and I have no part in your election, the candidates here. There are 29, I think, deputies in this island. I can vote for 2 of them, along with 12 constables, who none of whom I can vote for the states. There's one I have a peripheral vote for as the St Clement's constable. There's also a Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Solicitor General, the bailiff, and the Dean, who's sitting with us tonight, besides the 12 constables. All of them paid, all of them sitting in the states, all participating to some degree or other in government. Can we have a statement from the candidates, as since you're all going to be governor, the ones who are elected are going to be governing me, and the others who I've mentioned are going to be participating. Can we have a commitment from you to get rid of all those non-elected people that the whole island hasn't participated in their election?
Can I just focus on I need to know what you're asking. Non-elected normally means governor, bailiff, AG, SG, Dean. But you've also said you don't have a role in electing most of the others because you're in St Clement. Quite understand about the first part of that. That's not a problem. Get that. Are you asking for an island-wide mandate for everybody, so you can elect everybody?
I'm trying to express the problem. There's a lot of discussion about the malaise, the political malaise, and people not being represented, and I'm trying to spell out to you the degree of non-representation of everybody in this island because they are not participating in the election of the people who form the government, and it includes people like yourself, I'm sorry to say.
No, it's fine, not at all. I'm very quite big enough to stand up for myself if necessary. Sam, why don't you kick that off?
Yeah, sure. Before anything else, I consider myself in politics. I am a Democrat, and I believe that nobody should play a role in government in Jersey unless they are elected adequately by the people. So I don't believe there should be any unelected members of the States of Jersey, and there should certainly be no unelected members of the States of Jersey with voting rights. That's absolutely out of the question. I would support a States made up purely of elected members. That means no bailiff in the States. On day one of my law degree, I got told that a separation of powers was absolutely fundamental, and that means, sadly, that the bailiff has to go out the States if we want to be able to claim to be a 21st century democracy. I think the same about the other members, Deputy Bailiff, Attorney General, the Dean. He's doing a fantastic job chairing this, but I don't believe unelected members should sit in the States of Jersey. I believe that the people should be able to choose the government that represent them without any influences from anything that doesn't have a mandate from the people. And that's also why I believe in party politics, because I believe that will allow voters the opportunity to directly say who is in their government and what direction the government of Jersey goes in the future. That's absolutely fundamental, and I completely support democratising our system and bringing it into the 21st century.
Thank you very much. Bernie.
Well, I fully support a fully democratic system. Unfortunately, At the moment we don't. Like you said, most of the constables just get in unelected. How we're going to address that, I don't know. But like I said earlier on, if we had an island-wide mandate, then that to me has got to be the most democratic system of all, where we elect everybody, not just super constituencies or small districts. We elect the whole assembly. I think that has got to be the way forward, and it's the most democratic of them all. Thank you.
Jeff?
If somebody can tell me how to organise an island-wide election in order to have an island-wide vote for every member of the states with whatever length of ballot paper that produces, to produce 49 or 42 or 46 members, what are we talking about? At least 200 long, most of whom will be independents unless we get a party system up and running, and I wish we would. Then if somebody can tell me how that works and can demonstrate it, then I'll support it. But until then, I'm sceptical because I don't think it can be made to work. The bailiff should be out of the States, must be out of the States, and I think that will happen sooner rather than later, because as we deal with more and more foreign jurisdictions, they look at our system and go, that is strange. That doesn't exist almost anywhere else in the world, where that dual role, head of the judiciary and head of the states, the parliament, is vested in the same person. The fact that 11 out of 12 constables have been unelected shows the lack of democracy in that system. The constables surely get elected first and foremost to run their parish, and then happen to have the right to sit in the States. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. If they want and they have the ability to do both roles, two jobs, which is pretty good, then fine, let them stand to be elected as constable, and then on a different sheet to be the deputy, the representative in the States. That's the way forward. I actually heard the tale today about what's been happening in Trinity, where the constable, there were two constables retiring, and there were two candidates who wanted to stand, and the constable initially agreed to one of them standing, and then went back to him and said, no, you can't stand for the constable because my cousin wants to stand and it's his turn. And that's the system we're running. That's democracy. I don't believe so.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure what I'd do with that answer, Jeff, but thank you for it anyway.
The truth, it's the truth.
Martin.
Yeah, I would, if elected, I would lobby for the removal of such officers that were not elected to the States Chamber. I think in the previous question, the previous referendum I voted A, if that gives you any idea about how things work, futile as that was. I think that, you know, it comes back to this big debate, and I think we need to have it, and I think the whole island needs to have it, really, what we're going to do with the parish system, because if you're going to remove the constables from the chamber, which I think is a good thing, then you're going to have to start looking closely at what the parish actually does and what its relationship is to the chamber, to the executive, to even to its own parishioners. I mean, I lived in St Martin's, and I stood in St Martin's in 2008, and I lived in St Martin's for about 3 years. I found the parish hall, St Martin's public hall, to be incredibly cliquey and almost impossible to penetrate in some ways. So there are issues about that. I don't think these guys need to be in there anymore. I'm sorry, you've done a good job tonight, but you know, I don't think they need to be in there. You know, we need a progressive modern democracy where, you know, we're I don't know what we're doing. We're clinging on to some nostalgic thing, you know, and we need to stop that now. And everyone has a vote for everyone.
Rod.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the question. I think you're right. As you were alliterating your own thoughts there, it is a sad indictment of where we find ourselves. I mean, this is what's been interesting to me trying to set up a youth parliament. One of the things I said to them is why don't you start discussing some of the ideas of what we already have and what you would like to look for in the future. And I think Sam's right. I think we will move towards a more democratic parliament as we go along, but I don't think the island particularly is ready for it at the moment. And the clue was in the discussion I had with the guys from the youth parliament, which at the moment is just a few girls from JCG. And I said to them, when you're putting it together, will you look for a particular kind of a vote, or how will you put your whole sort of assembly together? And they asked me the question of what I thought how it should work. And at the time I said, well, because of the way I'm dealing with education, what you should consider is looking at the parishes and go back to the constables and really begin to open up the discussion about what you should and shouldn't do. And they went away, and I said, what's your decision? And they said, we're going for a parish-based parliament, having 3 candidates for each parish, because they understand what that means to them. And I was quite surprised by that, I've got to say. I thought they would go for a proportional representation, the kind of thing that Sam's been talking about. So I feel very sorry for the Dean sitting here as everybody discussed him sort of in the third person, but I think we will get there, but I don't think the island's particularly ready for it now, and I think it will be an evolutionary process, not a revolutionary process.
But you have to start the debate, don't you? Someone has to start the debate. The debate has to go out to the public, and people have to be involved in that debate, because people are frustrated with the system as it is, and it needs to be discussed on a broader level than just within the chamber.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I think.
Just as a point of clarification, I would hate anyone here to think that the Dean has a vote, because I don't. My colleague, the Bishop of Soda and Man, does up there, but not only do I not have one, believe me, I sit there rejoicing. I do try to help, and I do act as chaplain to the States. So thank you for that. Where am I looking for my next question? Yes, sir, right at the back.
I'd like to know what your views are on promoting, what views you've got on promoting a new education system for the island, to make the island more intelligent, better educated, a better atmosphere in the island, more convivial, more one family community, united, and educated about Jersey's heritage, Jersey's values, how unique we are, and promote ourselves as a community multi-ethnic, multicultural, cosmopolitan, and promote all the values that are good about Jersey, to make us united as a community, as one island and one family, and how you think we should promote our heritage, our history, how we should do that.
Thank you very much. So we're looking at the education and culture side of things. Bernie, will you kick off for us?
Yes, I don't think the gentleman was in when I gave my speech at the beginning. I believe that we need to have a strong tourism-led educational programme where we export our history outside the island, as well as teaching the kids at school. Like, we celebrate, or not celebrating as such, we will be in a few years' time celebrating the end of the First World War. Now, we should have school children going across, having a look at the trenches, and then coming back and giving talks, and actually having outside classes down on the waterfront. We've got those trenches in place at the moment. But we should be actually trying to get people from outside the island to come in and see our heritage. If we had more people coming in, it would be higher up on the educational agenda, because there'll be a lot more out there, a lot more sites opened, and a lot more resources. And I think that's one of the ways forward. If we can mix education with our tourism, it would be a great way forward.
Martin.
Yeah, culture, very interesting. I am a performer, a writer, a musician, a performance artist even, if you want to put it that way. And I think that, yes, we do a lot for culture. I think there is significant funding for culture. And I think that's a good thing. And I think, you know, it is all about expression in the end. And people want to express themselves, and they need to express themselves. And we need to have those kind of facilities there. I think as a small place, it's quite difficult. It would be quite difficult to project ourselves out into the world. But I think one way of doing it, when you see all this sort of Jersey finance business trips to China and India and all the rest of it, and a whole swathe of guys go out there on a plane, take someone cultural with you, take a poet with you, take a playwright with you, take a filmmaker with you, and get them to explain while all the accountants are explaining and all the businessmen are explaining the business position, take someone who's got culture, take someone who's creating culture. I'm not talking about me, although I'd love to fly out to China, but take someone who's creating culture and get them to project that image of Jersey over to the people that we meet, for example. Education-wise, it's very gloomy news, obviously, in the paper the other day. The Institute of Directors, I'm not entirely sure what their angle on education is exactly. But, if that's the case, then I think it's tragic, because it's grim. I've got a 12-and-a-half-year-old daughter and a almost 16-year-old daughter, both in secondary education as we speak.
9 seconds.
I actually find that their educational standard is very good. And in a previous incarnation, I was a teacher, and I think that, the standard is pretty good. Obviously, you can do more. Obviously, you can fund it more. Let's do that.
Rod.
Well, I feel I've got a bit of an advantage on my colleagues here, and I feel it's a little bit unjust, but I'll just alliterate some thoughts. You particularly made reference to culture and history and things, and it was quite interesting. I had a set of history teachers, and I asked, because I'm on the Bad Verzak twinning committee, I took along some internees, and it was astonishing. They knew themselves, these are the history teachers teaching this stuff, very little about what happened during the war, which shocked me. And so we were able to introduce that into the curriculum. The new director has come over here, and he's equally shocked to find that what he was expecting was that we would have an inherent knowledge about the history of the island. He's been sitting sort of behind Mario Lundy for about 2 or 3 months now, just picking up what he had previously left, and was shocked to see that there wasn't enough information regarding the heritage and the occupation and everything else really to do with Jersey. So one of the things that we are looking at that is on his list, and I won't go through the whole thing, but we've always kept ourselves to an English curriculum. And we've never really considered making it really Jersey-centric. So that's on our agenda, is certainly if I get in as a minister, I'll be looking at that, is looking at that, making it more Jersey-centric, and with that would come the history in particular. And I think it's even true, the sort of thing Martin's talking about is that generally most people don't know the history of this island. It's quite amazing if you just look at the size of sites like Lacotte and I can't remember the Laverine. These are massive Neolithic sites. So we've got a massive history that goes almost prehistory up to and beyond the occupation. We had a chap came over recently who's considering putting a festival on here, and was just shocked at how rich this place was in terms of its heritage. So I agree with you. I think it does need ramping up. Thank you. I'm done.
Jeff.
Yes, I think I want to address the question slightly differently. The retiring minister recently said we have an education system which is very divisive, and what he meant was that that case we have 40% of our students in fee-paying schools, so we actually cream several times all our education system. People go to fee-paying schools on the mainland, boarding schools. They fee-paying 40% up here, and then Helier takes another cream away from the partner schools, and what you're left with is a partner school which, if you look at it without the overall picture, people like Mark Boliat can say you've got a rubbish education system based on not a holistic look at what we do actually do. We've got a very good system. What we have is less money spent on state schools than on the fee-paying schools in the end. Something like 11,500 per pupil in the state school and 13,000 in the fee-paying schools. And the rebalance of that, I think, is an important thing to do. Our example should be Finland, where staffing is at levels and class sizes are at levels unheard of in the UK system, in the Jersey system. And that's what we need to do, I think. We have to also look at the efficiency of our system, and it's a very, very delicate subject. We've got 100,000 population. If you took a town in the UK with 100,000 population, it wouldn't have 6 centres dealing with post-16 education. It would have 1 or at most 2. And we've got 6 centres. And that can't be an effective or efficient way, A, of having a broad curriculum, and B, of making sure that people have a rounded education in the 6th form, or post-16.
Sam?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I agree with everything that Jeff said, but I'll talk about the sort of history, heritage side of it. I'm a real buff for that sort of stuff. I think we've got so much going for us in Jersey by way of historical stories and sites as well. I brought a friend from London to Jersey last summer, and we did all the castles and whatever, and it was really, really great. And, you know, when we've got these assets, we've absolutely got to use them. In terms of our history, though, there's loads more that can be done. For example, did you know that on the 28th of September 1769, Jersey had its very own revolution? Now, not many people know about that, but it's a fundamentally important event in Jersey's history that Mike Dunn down here has done a lot to promote in the past. And one of the things the state should be doing is supporting people like that who want to promote awareness of these events and put on events in support of that, because they're really fundamental to who we are as an island and as a community. You know, things like that, in particular the Jersey Revolution, you know, that shows the importance of people power, and I think it spreads a lesson that's relevant today in terms of what we as a community can achieve when we work together for common aims and for something important like democracy. So I'm really keen on all that, and I think the folk band Bad Lebec have done some great stuff for Jersey heritage and culture as well. The accordion player is a member of Reform Jersey, Montfort Tadyer, who has been doing some great work there to promote the Helier language. So I think more support for things like that would be really, really great, because we've got so much to be proud of here.
No, thank you. I'm looking for another question. Is there anyone who hasn't answered who hasn't asked a question that is burning to say something? Madam. Do you mind if you just hang on for the microphone? Sorry. Thank you.
Tourism, event-led tourism. I used to run an event here every year, and I've stopped doing it now because it went downhill. We didn't really get the proper support from tourism. Well, we got the support from tourism, but then it changed, and the Tourism Development Fund then handed out any help. But I was told on my last meeting with them, we're not going to subsidise people's holidays. They were more interested in supporting new events. But the old events are going down, but if they had the support of tourism, they would still be going. I used to bring over 100 cars on an event that I used to run, and it was 40 cars, because we couldn't give the high level of entertainment without the funding from tourism. And I was also told by tourism, if we wanted that sort of event, we just have to charge more.
Thank you very much. So something about supporting the tourism sector, that's something we hear quite frequently. Where should we start with this one? Jeff, would you mind kicking off?
Thought you might do that. Yes, we'll talk about event-led tourism, and every minister on the hustings in St Lawrence will be saying, yes, I back event-led tourism. The reality is, as you say, that the funding for event-led tourism has been slowly withdrawn, by piece by piece by piece, and yet people still say I support wholeheartedly event-led tourism. It's one of the cliches that every minister will say. And yes, one of the things that I think we could do, and it happens in many parts of the country, is to have a writers' workshop, a writers' event, which would attract a different area of clientele. We've got to find some new visitors, I guess it would work. So that would be one thing that I would be very supportive of. But I think in an overarching position, I'm very glad that we finally got some work done on Fort Regent, and there's plans to develop that, because what we desperately need above the event-led tourism is a wet weather centre where people can come. People can come, and this year, because the sun has shone, and they've been totally happy with coming here. But when it rains, you get some very unhappy visitors because there's nothing to do. We desperately need a proper wet weather facility so people can go to. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Rod.
Yeah, well, this one's close to my heart, I have to say. Broncos has just finished, and I was there at the opening night and spoke at the closing night. I mean, that's one of the best events that we've had, and I do feel very sorry that you've had an event and it didn't continue. One person I remember some years ago at Broncos said to me, Jersey is a fantastic place, it's really easy to start events, it's very hard to keep them going. And Xanthi has struggled amazingly to keep Broncos going, but it does represent some of the best values that we have in Jersey now. And what I loved about it was, and I did say at the end, it provides these kind of beautiful collisions of art, the sort of thing Martin was talking about, art and writing. And
Mine's going for 30 years.
oh well, I'm sorry that there was a demise. But there was this, as I say, beautiful collision of ideas. It was the one place that you can talk about, I think there was discussion, political discussions, there was film, there was art, there was photography. We've equally got other things like, just right, you know, everybody talks about the other things that we have like Jersey Live and folklore. But there's contemplations of other events happening. I think what is the struggle that people have, the struggle that tourism or the Tourism Development Fund has, is they always tend to give you £1 and then want 2 back, and it doesn't work that way. And what I was up in Scotland at a cultural conference, and what I loved about the way the Scottish have done it, they have absolutely gone out and said, what we're going to do is we're going to support culture because it's a notion of well-being. It's good for your spirit, it's good for your soul, we understand how it affects the community. And having that concept and that point of view absolutely allows them to put on events like the Edinburgh Festival and everything else they do on the peripheral level. So I'm hugely supportive of it, but again, it's a matter of funding. Thank you.
Sam.
Yeah, cutting support for events like that is so short-sighted, isn't it? Because when we put on these great events so we can get people coming to Jersey, they spend their money whilst they're here, and not only that, but I think they make us feel good as an island to see people coming here and having such a good time. I was we were in King Street earlier on doing some canvassing, and whereas you're trying to give an election leaflet to someone, we did have a few people say, oh, we're not from Jersey, we're just tourists here, and we had to apologise for the bad weather because, as Jeff said, there isn't a huge amount to do otherwise, so that's something that's really important to get sorted. But yeah, Broncage was absolutely great this year. I spoke at an event there, and it was so good to see that back and doing a great job. So we need to support these sorts of things, and you bring somebody to Jersey and they have a good impression of it, they'll come back again, and they won't necessarily, need a greater incentive because they know that it's safe to come to Jersey and have a good time here because there's stuff to do, and that we've got the best beaches in the world. That should be enough to bring people here. But we need a government that doesn't forget that we've got a tourism industry and that it is important, not just for the economy, but for our well-being as an island as a whole. And so I really, really want to see more events in Jersey helped that are supported by the government because it's good for everything.
Thank you very much. Bernie.
We need to actually have events that are sponsored by companies, corporate sponsorship, as well as government paying towards it. The Portuguese Food Festival, which is on for 4 days, we attract a camera team over from Madeira, and they filmed for the whole 4 days. They actually went around the island and filmed in most of the popular tourist attractions like the zoo, Gorey Castle, and various other attractions. And that film goes out around the world. It's shown in Brazil, South Africa, Madeira, Portugal, basically any Portuguese-speaking country picks up this particular TV company. Yeah. So I believe we need to try and get a mix of both states funding and corporate sponsorship. Unfortunately, there's only X amount in the pot to go around, and there's lots of events. You've got your Battle of Britain, your Battle of Flowers, Jersey Live, Broncage, Real Ale Festival, just to name a few. We've only got a finite pot, and though I do believe there are more events that should be helped by the state, I think some of it could be
90 seconds.
Sponsored by corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're forgetting is that we're quite an expensive island to visit. Logistically, to bring over, a lighting rig, for example, for a live rock band, is not a cheap exercise by anybody's standards. And so, therefore, these things need funding. So there are those kind of issues. I'm not against events. I like events. I was in one the other day, so they're a joy, really. But it depends on the event, and it depends on what people want, and what your audience is, and what the numbers are, and what the perceived revenue generation is from those events. I've already said I quite like beer, and I thought the beer festival was very good, very, very busy, and I think that's one of those festivals. I remember when it started in one small tent, and it's been going on and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I think that's an interesting festival, caters both for locals, and a lot of people come over. Those camera nerds, they come from all over the world, to get an ale down in there. So they are generating that kind of interest. I think Broncage is very good, should be supported. I think Jersey Live is another one of those things that was resisted, we can't have live rock music corrupting people. And now look at it, it's a little boutique festival that people really love, and they come from all over the place to see the acts. So events, why not? I mean, I've been working on the street, not on the street, but in a shop on the street in town. I've noticed a lot of German, Scandinavian retired people this year with walking sticks. They're coming over to walk along the coast. They want to have a look at the island and look at its natural beauty, and it is beautiful. And we've had a fantastic summer. And support as many events as we can. That's what I would say, if it's feasible.
Thank you. Friends, my colleagues and I were having a chat before we started, and thinking of how long we would go on for this evening. I do not want to cut things short, neither do I want to be scratching around for more questions to be answered, simply to kind of keep us going. Is there anyone who hasn't asked a question yet, who really does have one that is how can I put it, fishing in new waters? Would you mind if I bowl one at the troops and give you time to think? Bill Clinton is famous for having on his wall at election time, "It's the economy, stupid." And I have to say that we've ranged far and wide this evening of all sorts of different things. Who's in the States, and what about education? But I've then been comparing that with what I'm stopped in King Street and asked about. And the thing that I'm stopped in King Street and asked about is not, should I be saying, it's probably not, who's in the States or how much are they paid or whatever. It's the economy. Where are we getting the jobs from? What's plan B if and when finance doesn't deliver everything we want? So can I ask my colleagues up here, what's the plan for the economy? How do we get growth? How do we see people paid what they used to say was a fair day's pay for a fair day's work? As a St Helier number 2 voter, why should I vote for you to handle the economy? Martin.
Thanks. Well, that's a big one, isn't it? And I very much doubt whether they would let me anywhere near the economy, to be honest. But I think there is a need to diversify away. The finance industry, okay, it's the golden goose, blah, blah, but there is a need to diversify away from just a monoculture in business, if you want. And I know other stuff is happening, and I can't really give you, a full answer to that. I think that that we appear to have pulled through some kind of recession, although I don't actually believe that's true. We've borrowed an awful lot of money, which now makes us more vulnerable. We are probably going to have to tax wealth at some point, and that's an issue and a debate that we're going to have to talk about at some point. But you can't, economy is not just about taxing people, and it's not about, neither is it about borrowing. I don't know. Again, we're a small place. We need to generate maybe a little bit more entrepreneurship, and we need to support that entrepreneurship. We need to, maybe make rentals, for example, for units for people like mechanics and joiners and people like that, for example. Build the units, rent them to them cheap, let them take on staff, let them nurture a small business, and that will generate wealth into the economy. Maybe that's an idea. 10 units, we can afford to do that. We can afford to give a guy a break, somewhere along the line. Currently, people are suffering because of the high rental costs of workspace, storage space, that kind of space, along with lots of other things. But I don't know. I would hope we'd set up some sort of group, and we'd have to really, really discuss this, because it is an issue.
Okay, I've just been looking at the GVA figures produced by the Stats Department, and they show that we've got back to a position where we had no growth last year. We've had year after year -3, -6, -5, -1, -4% in growth, negative growth. It's not surprisingly then, after those years of negative growth, our income tax returns are not matching what they should do, or the estimates they were. The Treasury Minister has managed to balance a budget by scrabbling around in every little pot he can and finding some money to balance it for 2015. What happens in 2016? Those pots are empty. He's reliant on the economy taking off and improving, because interest rates go up. Interest rates go up, then our banks make more money. Simple as that. Now, I don't think that's going to happen next year. And as I said before, the reality is, I think, in order to maintain our society, our services, to keep ourselves properly, we are going to have to raise taxes, but they don't want to say that. For example, paying people a higher than minimum wage actually saves the government money. As I pointed out before, £9,000 for a minimum wage job, minimum. That's the support we have to give it. That's taxpayers' money. £60 million going, or the best part of £60 million going towards that in-work poverty. One of the things we can do to encourage business is that we've got two classes of social security. Class 1, you're employed. If you're employed, Class 2, everybody else. Other systems have many classes of social security designed to fit particular circumstances. The fact that self-employed are paying 12.5% off their social security bill could be adjusted, certainly for new startups, so that there's a lower rate and it gradually builds, let's say, over 3 years while you establish yourself. So we can help business by taking off a little bit of the burden on social security. For example, that's a way to get growth that isn't the growth they're talking about, which is sucking in people instead of training up our own people to do the jobs wherever we can.
Bernie.
Jeff touched on social security on the low end. What about the higher end? Maybe we should look at hiring the cap that we have at the moment. I think if we just move that up a little bit, maybe we could actually tax the banks an extra half or 1%. That would bring in quite a bit. I know we don't want to go overboard and sort of get them to move off island, but if we just take small amounts over a wide range of taxations, I think that'd be a lot better. I also think we should be encouraging high earners with low footprint. people in the digital sector. How about having a casino? I know in the past that's been turned down, but a casino would be a high taxpayer and would actually help if we stuck it up Fort Regent to actually run Fort Regent, to pay to run Fort Regent. How about looking at alternative things? A Jersey credit card, where we can make money on the interest payments. These are all things that need to be looked at, rather than hit the small earners by raising GST and other taxations. We need to be looking outside the box and see where else we can raise revenue from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sam?
One of the downsides to party politics is that you find your colleague you're sharing the platform with makes a lot of the points that you wanted to make. But I just want to expand upon a few of them. Jeff talked about social security contributions for the self-employed. It's absolutely mad that we only have 2 classes of social security contribution, which means someone who's self-employed who is on a relatively low wage will be paying 12.5%, whereas you get somebody who's earning hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds who are paying an absolutely tiny proportion. That's the exact opposite of the way round it should be. Bernie mentioned raising the social security cap. That's in the Reform Jersey Manifesto. We absolutely believe in that, because a fair tax system is one that is progressive and will tax people according to what they earn. More and more, if you earn more, you can afford to pay a bit more. A regressive tax system like GST, for example, is something we absolutely oppose because it's unfair and it's not part of what our vision is for a just society. In terms of improving the economy, we could do some of the things that Jeff talked about. I want to see something called a right of first tenure in commercial rents, which would stop small businesses struggling to pay their rents for their commercial businesses, so that they can look to invest in the long term. They can maybe take risks, because that's one of the things that's important for a business to be able to do, is to take a risk. Those sorts of things are really important. And every day at the senatorial hustings, they're talking about the sort of new and emerging industries, things like the digital economy, fintech and things like that. I mean, you know, nobody here is going to suggest we don't support that. Of course we should be supporting that. But there's lots of adjustments we could make to our tax system to mean that ordinary people have more money in their wallet, because they spend that in the local economy. They'll spend it in our local shops here. Hugely important. We need to improve wages for some at the low end so that they can go out there and spend their money. That's absolutely important to growing the economy.
Finally, Rod.
Thank you. Well, I think Sam and Jeff and actually Bernie have all sort of covered that end of the spectrum with regard to the economy that we have here on the island at the moment. What interests me most is really the sort of thing that Martin was talking about. We've set ourselves up as a government with things like Gigabit Jersey, Digital Jersey. I think the initial aim was to sort of come up with a second Silicon Valley, which I think was a bit of a missed dream, really. I think we're far too late for that sort of thing. But what we have behind it is, certainly with what we've done with coding clubs and what's happening through the digital strategy in the schools, is we're now priming kids to consider these things. We've got to then help them understand what creativity means and what it means to be an entrepreneur and what it means to take risks. So I think we've got that. We have an innovation fund which is equally primed to accept some of these entrepreneurial ideas. And the other thing I came across, I hadn't really seen it before until I was asked to host a delegation, the sort of thing Martin was talking about earlier, of Chinese that came over. And I was fascinated to learn that there were businessmen both from China and from London. Some had a base in London. They had actually come over hunting for bear. They were really looking to find, were we an island that geographically is beautifully located? Would we have an infrastructure and would we have a workforce that they could actually adapt and adopt? And the answer to that was yes, except we hadn't given them at that point in time enough detail. So these people are looking looking around and are looking at us a viable concern for the future. So I think that's really important. One other thing I happened across when I was up in Scotland at the Culture Conference was the people of Orkney were suffering dreadfully, and it's an island that represents itself very similar to our own in our economy. They saw, they saw young people moving away. What they did was they looked to their past to create their future. They looked to back their old industries, which in that particular case was Harris Tweed. They got some designers in. They're now opening up brand new factories, and the young people are coming back. So I think that's another option for us, is to look back at what we were great at and begin to rediscover those sorts of things. So digital for me is a way forward. I think certainly the Cape Jersey, bringing in some of these people and looking at us for the first time, is another way forward, and then perhaps looking at our past. Thank you.
Friends, we're going to draw stumps there. May I say that the speech given by the Archbishop of York in General Synod in July, he started by saying, a lot of the things I was going to say have been said, but not by me, and proceeded to say them all again. May I just thank colleagues here for resisting that particular temptation. And I do want to say this about States members, and it's not flannel. Since I've been in the States for the last 9 years and serving as chaplain, I have to say that I am singularly impressed with the amount of time and care and genuine integrity that States members put into what they do. Clearly, not everyone all the time, we're not all perfect, but I think actually, if I may say so, I think sometimes we electors give them too much of a hard time. And I am delighted to have been asked to chair this evening, and to thank all the candidates who have spoken, and to thank you most particularly for giving up your evening and showing your interest and commitment to our democracy. And as it says, we have our future in our own hands.
And as your longest serving deputy, it's a great pleasure to thank Bob for his chairmanship tonight. I'm sure you agree he's done a fine job, stalwart job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.